You know, the beginning of any relationship starts off, well, at least the beginning of any good relationship is like bliss in the beginning, but then as you kind of get into the weeds, some of the things come out that start to kind of bug you. Hey, this is the 2022 Honda CRF450RX, and I want to kind of just give you some of my thoughts as I've started to have to maintain this bike. It's something that I need to do more of, is just talk to you about living with a bike, because when I buy these bikes, I review them 2 to 6, maybe 6 months, maybe even a year later. And that's because I want to be able to have been in a lot of different situations with them, different types of terrain, and also different maintenance tasks and things, and just kind of see how it compares. So today I've spent a significant amount of time. I've been doing air filter changes, I've been doing oil changes, I've been messing with the battery a little bit, and I wanted to just kind of bring some of my thoughts to you as I've had some of them now after owning this bike for a couple of weeks. First thing is oil changes. Some bikes are easier to change oil than others. Now, this is the stock mudguard that comes on the bike when you get it. I don't call this a skid plate, I just call this a mudguard because it doesn't really protect much. But one thing it does is it requires you to take this off every time you change the oil, because your oil plug is actually a 10 millimeter, you need a 10 millimeter Allen key or Allen wrench, and it's right, it's a big circular drain plug right down here. So you're gonna have to take this off every time. Not only do you have to have that off for the drain plug, but also up here is your oil filter. And this wing covers that right there as well. So now I've got an aftermarket skid plate on here. This is an AXP skid plate. It's funny, I've got an AXP skid plate on there, but I'm wearing an SXS, 2 different skid plates. Hey, equal opportunity. This is gonna have to come off every time I do my oil filter, and then I'm also gonna have to take off my Cherubi's engine guard here, but those are protection pieces. That's not necessarily Honda's fault. Honda, I don't like the fact that you have to take this off every bloody time. I also find that when you're doing oil changes on the bikes that have a drain plug right in the middle, I find that it's very messy. I like a bike that you can lay over and take your drain plug out and then bring it back over. I just find there's easier ways to do it than when it's right under. You usually have your stand right here. I know some stands have a hole in the middle, but really, you can make a huge mess. And I find that you make a bigger mess when you've got a drain plug right down there on the bottom. So I don't love that, but hey, that's what we're doing here. On to my next topic, it's the air box cover. So you have to take out an 8 millimeter bolt here, which I don't like. I don't like that it isn't toolless. And then getting this thing off isn't a big deal. Of course, it is a big deal when you're on camera. Once you have this off, actually, they've kind of made this. I don't have a problem with the way that the air filter works. It's kind of got a little clip thing in here. And even the first time doing this, I'm like, okay, I see what they've done, and they've kind of made it so it's not totally idiot proof, but it's mostly idiot proof. So that's fine. Here's what's kind of finicky. There is, if you have this the right way, there's a little hook right here that has to hook back here. And then these things also have to go in the front. And you've got to get this piece right here to stay inside of this. Now, the first time I did this, it took me like 10 minutes. Hey! I had the seat off. I was trying to like wiggle this thing on, because you're doing like 3 things at once. You're having to get it hooked in here, hooked in down here, and hooked in back in the back on this hanger. And it's just kind of a pain. I don't like it much. Now, I have gotten better with it as I've done this more, but basically if I get the hanger back here, kind of get that there, and then once I got all this in place, if I take my hand under here and kind of pull out with this left hand here, if I just kind of pull that out while getting that to go in there and then there, now I've got it in. So I know that didn't look that bad, but that actually took a little bit of time to be able to get that down. The first time doing that, I was like, wow, this sucks. Now, that which we persist in doing becomes easier, not because of the nature of the thing has changed and our power to do it increases. I just think you shouldn't have to use a freaking tool, and it shouldn't be quite as difficult to get that in. You shouldn't have to do 3 things all at once that are so close. I have a feeling that this is gonna be a sticking point with me for some time to come. Let's talk about the battery box for just a second. So this cover is typically over the battery here. Now, as you can see, it's kind of finicky with this. I want to just show you this. So you've got a bolt here on the top and a bolt on the bottom. This is how this sits. So I look at this and I say this is mass centralization, and I like mass centralization. Bring the heavy stuff together towards the center, and I think it's maybe one of the reasons why this bike feels so good. The thing that I'm a little bit concerned about, this is dry now, but this, I don't think there's a lot of moisture control in here. There's no gasket on this. And I just feel like it's kind of right out to get muddy and dusty and dirty. This bike is only a week and a half old and it already looks fairly dirty, and I've only been on 2 rides with it and I've washed it. There was a lot of moisture down in here, and I'm not sure that this battery has enough kind of like weather protection here, because dirt and mud can kind of get down in there. Now, I understand a lot of batteries are under the seat, and I know it's not a perfectly sealed off place there either. It just feels like this is kind of a vulnerable area for the battery to be. I know in hard enduro situations, we get stuff that pounds the side quite a bit. I don't know how well this plastic cover is going to hold up, and I'm not sure about this. I know that the dealer actually blew this battery up just trying to install the thing. Like they touched the ground in the wrong spot and boom, it snapped the battery immediately and it just ruined the battery. They had to pull this battery out of a different bike. So this was kind of finicky, very finicky for the dealer to get in, and they torched the battery when they went to just, trickle charge this thing or charge it. So I'm gonna leave this in here if I ever have to charge this, but I'm worried about all the dirt and stuff that's in here when the bike only has a couple of rides. That's something we're gonna have to watch. Not sure on that. Jury's out. Let's talk about nuts and bolts. So on this Honda, and you guys are gonna have to tell me if other Hondas like you've had have been like this, because this is the first full-size Honda that I've had that was brand new. I hopefully will have another one here soon, but there have been several things on this bike that were way, way too tight. Like for instance, my axle nut back here. Now I've got a really nice half-inch drive breaker bar back here. I could barely get this thing off. It's a 32 millimeter nut back here, but I could barely break it loose with this freaking breaker bar. If I hadn't have taken that off, and I was doing that to just do a lot of general setup, if I had just had my short little trail wrench that is only that long or whatever, there is no possible way I could have taken that axle nut off. Same thing happened up on the handlebars. It was way too tight. Same thing happened up on my front, the front axle. That was so freaking tight, I can't even tell you. So I just went through and I torqued things, but I have never had a bike that had things as over tight as this Honda. So it'll be kind of interesting. I don't know, just a warning, fair warning. Maybe go through it's one of the things I do anyway when I'm setting up bikes, but go through, make sure you can take stuff off that you might have to take off out on the trail, because it's really tight. At least this one has been. So I'm a little bit worried about my radiators. There is no bracing here really at all. The radiator shroud bolts right into the radiator, and this is just a mud flap, but this, for as near as I can tell, this offers zero structural integrity. Some bikes you need radiator braces, some bikes you don't. This is a bike that I fully believe would need radiator braces if you were gonna desert race this thing, because you lay this thing down, and I just think that this thing is just so exposed out here. I think that is just going to be a problem, and radiator protection I think is gonna be paramount on this bike. I haven't tipped it over yet, but I'm gonna find out if we can bend radiators really easily on this thing, I think pretty soon. Want to draw your attention right back here, back behind the pipe. When you're setting sag on this bike, and if you're gonna be checking sag, see my finger down here? It's really hard to film this. But these are the preload collars down here, the locking collars for that. It's very hard to get down in there to loosen those because you're going right back behind the pipe. It's almost like you've got to take your tailpipe off this bike to really get in there. Now there is one nut you could pull here, and then you could take your pipe off, or at least your silencer off. But man, there's not a lot of room down in here. Now once you get this loose, and because you got to get screwdrivers in there, you got to kind of come at it from weird angles. It's just a really tight area. Once you get that off, you can reach your hand down here. In fact, let me show you that. See, what I'm trying to say is once you get those preload collars, the locking collars loose, then you can reach down here on the shock and you can kind of turn this whole thing, as long as it's not super dirty, at least the threads up here. But this is just kind of tight, very tight. And you might have to take your pipe off in order to even get those preload collars loose or tighten them back up. Just, it's pretty tight down here. Last thing I want to show you is just how amazing it is to use these Showa clickers. See, I'll just put my screwdriver, wait, no, maybe I'll come at it from this side. No, maybe this way. Oh no, I can't use that at all unless I take my handlebar off, unless I get one of those flat, I've got one of those flat Race Tech screwdriver things, which you can't really count clicks with. Why in the world is Showa and KYB still putting a clicker on there that you can't use your fingers on, and you can't get a screwdriver in for most of us because our handlebars are on? So you got to take the handlebars off just to adjust your clickers. That is ridiculous. I will continue to hound on clickers until everyone comes along with what WP does and actually puts a finger clicker on this. Overall, so far, I'm really, really loving this bike. I'm enjoying riding it. I'm enjoying having a 450 back in the shop, and I'm loving having a Honda. There's a lot of cool things about this, and this is not a full review. I just wanted to show you there's a lot of things that things that are just kind of frustrating, things that are weird. Now, as you work on a bike and as you have it longer, you get more and more comfortable with it, and I'm definitely going to become more and more comfortable with this bike. I've even changed my grips out for various reasons. I already broke the throttle tube. That's a story for another day. But yeah, this is going to be a really fun bike. I'm excited to get the 250 version of it, but there's some things with it that I'm like, that's kind of weird. And I think there's going to be some other things too that we're going to find. But those are some things like I think that could be improved right off the bat, or at least we're gonna be watching with this. If you want to support what we're doing with Dirt Bike Channel, use the links down in the video description to Rocky Mountain ATV. That really, really helps me out. You need the tracking piece at the end of the URL, so if you want to bookmark one of those, you can just send me an email and I will give you the actual thing that you can bookmark. You have to be careful because as soon as you click on the link, Rocky Mountain ATV reloads the page without the tracking piece on the end of it. So anyway, it's just kind of a tricky deal. But yeah, here's the Honda. We're loving this sucker. Spent a bunch of time just doing oil changes and air filter changes and different things on the bike today. So I'm getting to know it more and more and more, just like any of the other bikes. And this will be a sweepstakes bike eventually. So later this year, it's 2022, later this year, this will be a sweepstakes bike along with its little brother, the 250RX version. Hopefully we get that. Obviously the gas over here will be a sweepstakes bike as well. Every bike you see in this room will eventually be a sweepstakes bike, which I will give away to you guys. It's one of the ways that I stay unbiased with the reviews, is just by buying them at retail and then giving them back to you, as kind of using it as a, an asset piece for the business. So that's what I have for you guys today. Loving the Honda, but there's some little things, as with anything. Like all the bikes are, none of the bikes are perfect. There's some things about the gas that drive me nuts. There's some things about the KTMs that drive me absolutely nuts. Same thing with Sherco, same thing with Kawasaki. They all have their strengths and their weaknesses just like the rest of us. Heaven only knows I've got a lot of weaknesses as well. Got a couple of strengths, and hopefully the strengths outweigh the weaknesses. But yeah. That's what we have for you. Hopefully you're having an amazing day, and leave a single track. Thanks.